last class of this particular 6th course on inner peace development for the online course of Paths to Recovery After Abuse and Trauma. And as with all the courses, this is not the end of understanding inner peace and how to attain it in your life. This is all based on a book I wrote this year on Own Your Peace, KISS Method for Inner Peaceful Living. And this is toward the end of the book. And I will tell you quite frankly that this particular class is not for everyone. This is the 4th cave. And the 4th cave information is not for everyone. It's something that you have to really hunger after, pursue. It's not necessary to go to this 4th cave to have wonderful inner peace experiences. This is the level where you are really in pursuit of transformational work that's transcendent and ascended. And I'm going to explain what those terms are in a moment. But don't feel like this is your cup of tea. And if you're not into the more metaphysical, spiritual practices, it may feel like a bunch of hogwash. I totally respect that. I certainly have a side of me that lives in skepticism as well. But nonetheless, I think it's really important to know that these very powerful tools really do have a great deal to do with many aspects of inner peace and with the power of living. And that is considered in this particular book. I have a lot of interviews with wonderful people that help discuss a lot of the topics. I'm going to go through the topics briefly and also the people who help me deal with that. The first one, I see my book is referenced here. This is the book on spiritual paths for successful life. And also there's another book very akin to this called Spiritual Gurus, Spiritual Paths, Your Choice. And they're both, this is the more modern version of that. This has 14 different approaches to spiritual consciousness. And with the idea that all of these spiritual ways of having spiritual consciousness is actually amazing and has tremendous impact on our lives, but it's not for everybody, because not everybody wants to go a faith-based or a spiritual path-based way of doing it. But in this book, I also talk about nature, science, business, and money earning as also, and random acts of kindness. Those have nothing to do with faith-based practices and everything to do with spiritual paths of sorts. The practice of mindfulness meditation are considered very powerful tools now. They've been popularized by a bunch of individuals, but those practices are thousands of years old and extend from Buddhism, Hinduism, and moved into mystic Christianity and the Kabbalistic practices that are relevant to Judaism and the whole wonderful meditative works in the Muslims routes, and then all I'm talking about the major religions that have these very mystical writers and mystical experience, the reveries. I will tell you that the mystical experience, the reveries, are so amazing. They're so transforming. And if you haven't had those types of experiences in your life, I'm going to suggest you study and chase after them to a degree, to a large degree, in fact, to a huge degree. I don't mean to step on anybody's toes. If you do not believe in these realms, I really respect that. You do not have to step into these realms in order to recover from abuse and trauma. You do not have to step into these realms in order to have wonderful lives. You do have to step in these realms, though, if you want to have transcendent and ascendant experiences. Another book that I have authored, I actually co-authored, it's called Your Soaring Phoenix, and there's a subtitle to it as well that'll give you more information, and the subtitle is Profound Tools for Spiritual Ascension with 26 Spiritual Teachers. Now, everybody in this room has gotten a free copy of this. This book is amazing. It has 42 different ascension tools. Now, when you start practicing ascension tools, you begin to realize that you are so much more than your body. You are so much more than your experiences. You are so much more than the traumas and abuses that you've suffered. That you are so much more than this life. You are so much more than the bruises that have harmed your body and your soul and your mind and your memories. You are so much more than all of that. And that's why this transcendent, ascendant part of this is part of inner peace and part of this path to recovery after abuse and trauma. Because once you realize that you're so much more than all of that, I mean, hugely more than all of that, you begin to realize that what you have gone through is usable, can teach you, is meaningful, purposeful, and still awful, and that you are hugely capable of managing that and so much more, because you now know you are so much more. I'm going to go to one of the authors that I interviewed called Erica Mckenzie. She wrote a book, Dying to Fit In. She is one of the near-death experience individuals that I have interviewed on my radio show. And for those of you in the class, this will be attached to the inner peace and different parts of these courses. You'll be able to see her interview. And she discusses how hellish she personally made her life. She personally, because of so much self-loathing, made her life hellish. She admits it. She couldn't get out of the trap. And as a consequence of the hell that just kept progressing and snowballing in her life, she died. She died. She was in a hospital. She was in a state of death for a long time. Interesting to say state of death, right? With the onset of resuscitation medicine, we now know that we can actually keep a body functioning even though the brain's flatline and the heart's flatline. We can lower the temperature of the body and keep it in a suspended animation. And then while there is recovery or medications offered, we can actually heal the body, and then the brain will wake up and the body will turn back on and the heart will come back. And we know that there's a space and a time where the person, for all purposes, is dead, and for all purposes shouldn't be coming back. But we now take advantage of that space, and we call it resuscitation medicine. It's just fascinating. Erasing Death, I think, is a book where this is discussed by a physician. This is a fascinating field. Now, individuals that come back into their body, we'll just say that way, who come back having had near-death experiences or after-death experiences, then come back and tell about them, can tell people what they were doing in the waiting room and what the doctor was saying and what was going in the operating room and what, they travel. And they can also talk about who they saw, friends, light, energy. They have downloads of amazing amount of knowledge. They have this profound experience of love. This isn't everybody's experiences. Some people's after-death experiences are horrible, terrifying, horrific, never to be repeated. I mean, they're just awful. But most of the ones we hear about are transcendent. And a person begins to realize that this physical existence is just either one of many or just a small aspect of who they are as much greater souls and beings. Now, Erica describes this beautifully in the interview that I have with her that you'll be able to listen to. But she also describes in her book, Dying to Fit In, how she came back with this renewed sense of loving herself, which she had never been able to do, and giving herself so much acceptance, which she had never been able to feel. And yet, because she was able to experience and feel it in this after-death experience, she was able to download it and bring it back and integrate it into her being, because she knew she was so much more. Now, another transcendent experience is that of, I'm sitting on the meditation floors here, is the individuals that have past life regressions. Now, past life regressions is something I do with people. I might take a whole day to do it with an individual. They'll pay for the whole day. Or we'll do a whole day seminar, or we do 2 hours of it. We're going to do a past life regression in our work here. I won't be able to do a past life regression with you in our meditations, but contact me. Now, past life regressions, it's interesting. The research by Heather Rivera Friedman, I always twist that up. She wrote a book about past life regressions, and she's also interviewed on my podcast. You'll see that down there, as well as her book is very readable and doable. Her research indicated that individuals that had experienced 4 to 6 different past life scenarios actually developed a greater sense of happiness because they had a different perspective on life. And so whatever traumas they experienced in this current life was put into an entirely different perspective. And what they were able to learn about their present life based on these past life regression experiences allowed them to be able to empower themselves to not only endure and survive, but it allowed them to emotionally and soulfully escape, feeling like they had to feel kidnapped and owned by these moments because they could gain a perspective that was so transcendent. So this is another way. And another way is through remote viewing. And remote viewing is a wonderful practice that actually was popularized by the governments. Russia, China, United States. Lots of books written on it. Some of them are kind of dark. The really good ones, a really good one that I love is John Horlowski's book. It's called The Sorcerer's Apprentice, I believe. It's really readable. John is a real interesting individual and lives with purpose and intensity. And his book portrays, again, the ability to use your mental capacities, your capacity to do remote viewing, that allows you to realize that you are not just your body, not just the history of your abuse and trauma, not just your situation right here and now. In addition, the experience of remote viewing gives you a sense of having so much more power to influence your life and those around you. It's a different type of power than just martial arts or self-defense. It's a different type of self-consciousness, awareness, that allows you to transform yourself. Now you take your abuse and your trauma, and it's real and it's present and it's right here. But you put it in the context of these other amazing experiences, dying and having a near-death or afterlife experience, past life regressions where you visit other lives that you can actually many times historically reference, research, especially with our online resources, and then remote viewing where you can actually go someplace, see something, experience it, be there, and then come back and then verify that your mind was actually there, or astral projection where you're actually traveling with your astral body. These things are just amazing. I call these soul journeys. And in my book, Your Soaring Phoenix, one section is dedicated to soul journeys. I actually have a website that's also dedicated to soul journey tools. And also I have a YouTube that's all about spiritual journey tools so that you can practice these experiences. I highly recommend this for individuals that have had abuse, traumas in their past. And what I find really important for all of us to notice is this. Most individuals that survived and endured abuse and trauma had what's called an out-of-body experience. In psychology, we call this depersonalization moments or dissociative moments. I think those are appropriate as well, and it certainly is a paradigm of looking at something where an individual has separated from themselves. A bit of the soul has left, and then it leaves behind it a fragmented part of the soul that needs to be reintegrated. And I discuss that in my book, Paths to Recovery After Abuse and Trauma as well, and we'll discuss this in one of our courses. But in addition to all of that, just imagine that you begin to know who you are on a soulful level, not just the mind, which we've been talking about as well, but on a soulful level, where you begin to be able to observe yourself in the context of something so much bigger than your body and your experiences in this moment. And that puts your experiences in an entirely different context, and you begin to explore it and understand it in a different way. So even though those horrors are right here, and they're real, now to be able to have other perspectives on it gives you something that transcends. And this is the transcendent peace. I talk about ascendant peace and transcendent peace in this book. I say that ascendant peace, which is like we talk about ascension tools, is when you yourself are in the process of recognizing how you can ascend to the spiritual domains of consciousness. Transcendent is when you live there as well as in this physical realm, and you can travel with ascendance and you can experience ascendance, but living in the transcendent enables you to give with so much more inside you because you have overcome And you're moving into the transformation. You're moving even beyond thriving because you are living in transcendence. And some people say we never actually live in transcendence in this lifetime, and I do not agree. Now, I'm not saying that I always live in transcendence, but I visit it. A little bit like some people visit moments of inner peace. I can visit that transcendent place. And I know that I can spend even more time there. But to be able to know that that transcendent experience allows you to say, I'm so much more than my trauma and abuse. I'm so much more than my body. I'm so much more than my fleeting and flowing emotions. I'm so much more than my efforts to practice peacefulness. I'm so much more than what I do, say, feel, and be in this physical form. And if I'm so much more than that, what does that say to the perspective I cultivate in my life and how I interact with other individuals? It says a lot, and it's huge. Now, in the process of ascendance, before transcendence, there's so many laws about the cosmos. The laws of manifestation and intention, and the laws of creativity, and the laws of creation. It is, like everybody wants to, how can I create this, what I do, the laws of intention, the book The Secrets, and so forth and so on. Those are practices of ascendance. What's interesting, when you move into transcendence, those things don't matter as much, because this ascendance is all about empowering yourself in your connection with your soul, living on the soul consciousness and how your soul consciousness infiltrates into the 3D material dimensions. But when you're living in transcendence, it doesn't really matter. It's like it's relatively less important because other things are so much more valuable. That, to me, is supreme inner peace. Because you're not entangled in efforts. You're living in the reverie of the sublime. And I want you to know about that. Even while you're struggling in the first cave or the second cave, or maybe you don't even know how to get the drawbridge of your castle down, so you don't have to deal with the crocodiles or the cold of being outside your castle. I want you to walk into that castle. I want you to own it. Know that every room, every furniture, every human being, everything you've populated in that castle is yours. And that then you can go to the top of that castle and touch nirvana, Shangri-La, heaven, oneness, unity, divine force, God, the skirt of God. Remember that parable where I think it was an old man or it was a young child that scrambled to just touch the hem of Christ's tunic. And Christ immediately said, who touched me? Who took my energy? Someone took my energy. And then sheepishly the person comes out and says, I did. I touched the hem of your skirt, knowing that if I touched the hem of your skirt, that I would be healed. And it's that kind of knowing that there is that realm and that we can touch it, but maybe we can even dwell in it. It's that realm, that elevation, that mystical reverie, that when we move in it, feel it, embrace it, dwell in it, we have owned our entire castle of inner peace. And maybe that's because we begin to dwell in the realms where inner peace and love are profound and supreme and truly the only authentic thing that goes on in this world, even in this 3D world. Even though it's so blinded and shrouded and stomped on in this three-dimensional plane, including the abuse and trauma we survived. And I'm not making light of how real that is and how awful that is. But I'm also not going to sell you down the river and say that that's all you have to go for, because there's so much more available for you. Okay. See you in the next course number 7. And now we are going to practice some ascendant and transcendent meditations. And we are as well, to some degree. But if you want to do more of this, then this is truly a one-on-one or group experience.